If you think you've heard everything, you're about to learn how wrong you are. This is Horror Diaries House of Mysteries. Welcome to a journey into the unknown. These mysteries span decades, borders, and logic itself. And yet, not a single one has ever been fully answered. Tonight, we explore them all. Before we start, please press the subscribe button and like this video. Also, where are you from? And what time are you watching? The first mystery. The mystery of the boy who dreamed the future. In 1982, a quiet town in Wales became home to an unusual story. It began when an 11-year-old boy named Geraint started waking up with vivid dreams. Dreams so detailed that he began writing them down every morning. At first they were simple: a car accident, a store fire, a power outage. Nothing unusual, but then the events he dreamed about began happening, exactly as he described. In one dream, he saw a red truck crash into a bakery on a Friday afternoon. 3 days later, at the exact same time, a red truck veered off the road and smashed into the bakery's front wall, just as he wrote. The boy's parents dismissed it as coincidence until he dreamed of a school roof collapsing during a storm. His mother kept him home that day. Hours later, a sudden windstorm tore off part of the classroom roof. No one died. But if he had been there, he would have been sitting directly under the collapse. As the dreams continued, he wrote each one in a small blue notebook. Some predicted trivial moments, others described serious accidents. And one dream, one he never spoke about, terrified him so deeply that he hid the notebook under his bed. A local researcher finally interviewed the boy. When asked how he saw the events, he gave a strange answer. "It feels like I'm remembering something that hasn't happened yet." After several years, the dream stopped abruptly. No warning, no explanation. But decades later, during a home renovation, workers found the boy's hidden notebook. Every prediction recorded was accurate, except the last page, which simply read, "I won't be here when it happens." To this day, no one knows what the final prediction meant, or whether it already came true. Another mystery. The mystery of the vanished man of Loon Lake. In the quiet Minnesota town of Loon Lake, people still talk about the disappearance of Gregory Halden, a fisherman known for his routine, his discipline, and his habit of never missing a sunrise on the water. On the morning of June 14, 1988, Gregory left his cabin before dawn. A fog covered the lake. His neighbor watched him step into his small aluminum boat, life jacket on, tackle box beside him, lantern glowing in the mist. Everything looked normal, but what happened after would puzzle the town for decades. At noon, a patrol boat found Gregory's vessel drifting across the lake. The engine was off, the oars were neatly placed inside. His jacket was still hanging on the seat. His thermos was warm, but Gregory was gone. Not a sign of struggle, no splash heard by anyone nearby, no footprints on the muddy shoreline, just the silent boat, turning slowly in the water. Police divers searched for 3 days. Visibility was low, but they mapped the lake floor carefully. They found nothing, no clothing, no tools, not even a loose item from his boat. A week later, things became stranger. Gregory's brother reported that the cabin lights were found switched on during the night. A freshly cleaned coffee mug sat on the counter. A window was open that had been locked earlier. But the property showed no forced entry and no fingerprints at all, not even Gregory's. The sheriff checked nearby cabins. Several residents said they woke that week to the sound of footsteps on gravel, as if someone were pacing outside their doors. Then came the most bizarre moment. A hiker found Gregory's wallet deep in the woods, 14 miles from the lake. It was dry, clean, and sitting upright on a moss-covered stump, as if placed there deliberately. No tracks surrounded it, no sign of wildlife disturbance. Local authorities never identified a suspect. Weather logs showed no sudden storms. Gregory had no debts, no enemies, and no reason to vanish. To this day, the lake is calm, quiet, and peaceful. But fishermen swear that on foggy mornings, you can sometimes see a lantern floating alone in the mist. And when they row closer, there's nothing there. The mystery of the train that arrived with no passengers. On a cold morning in 1955, a small station in Poland prepared for the arrival of a local passenger train, one that traveled the same route every day, carrying workers, families, and merchants from nearby towns. The station master, an older man named Tomasz, had worked there for decades. He could hear approaching engines long before anyone else. But on this particular morning, the tracks were silent, until suddenly the sound of a train echoed across the valley. The locomotive appeared through the fog exactly on schedule. It slowed down, brakes screeching softly, and came to a full stop in front of the platform. But something was wrong. No one stepped out. Not a single passenger, not a conductor, not even the driver. Tomasz walked to the front of the engine and climbed into the operator's cabin. It was empty. He checked every carriage. Each one was spotless, as if freshly cleaned. Seats empty, windows closed, lights flickering faintly. No luggage, no jackets on hooks, no newspapers on seats. It was as if the train had never been used. Yet logs confirmed it had departed from the previous station with more than 300 passengers on board. Radio contact from conductors at earlier stops confirmed they had seen the passengers enter and take their seats. Somewhere between stations, the passengers vanished. When investigators inspected the train, they noticed something unusual. All the clocks inside the train were frozen at 3:17 a.m., a time hours before departure. The watches belonging to the train staff, found left behind on hooks, showed the same time. Even more disturbing, the engine's internal logbook also recorded that the brakes were applied at 3:17 a.m. Yet the train had arrived at the station hours later, on time. The passengers were never found. No remains, no belongings, no explanation from nearby towns. Nothing recorded in police archives other than the single detail station workers never forgot. When the empty train pulled away from the station to be inspected elsewhere, the sound of voices echoed faintly from the windows as if hundreds of people were whispering at once. To this day, locals call it the silent train. And if you travel through that area early in the morning, some say you can still hear the echo of that engine, pulling in with no passengers and leaving with no answers. Hear the mystery of the Lighthouse of Flannan Isle. In December of 1900, a supply ship traveled toward the remote Flannan Isles off the coast of Scotland. The crew aboard expected to see the usual sight: 3 lighthouse keepers waiting on the rocks, ready to unload supplies. But as the ship approached, the lighthouse light was dead, and no one stood outside. The captain felt uneasy. A lighthouse should never go dark. When the crew reached shore, they climbed the steps toward the tower. Everything was silent except for the crashing waves. The front door was closed but unlocked. Inside, the kitchen table was set for a meal that had never been eaten. Half-finished bread, chairs pushed back quickly as if the men had left in a hurry, a coat missing from the wall, the other 2 still hanging. But the clock on the tower wall had stopped. Not broken, just stopped ticking. In the logbook, the last entry was strange: storm raging, sea roaring, all praying. But weather records showed clear skies. The next line came the following day: storm ended. See calm, God is over all. Yet no storm had been recorded anywhere near the island. And then the final entry: 3 men ventured out. No turning back. When investigators examined the cliffside, they found twisted metal railings, bent as though pulled by tremendous force. But the waves that week had been normal. Nothing strong enough to damage steel. The 3 men working the lighthouse, Thomas, Donald, and James, were never found. Local fishermen claimed they saw a strange white light hovering above the island days before the men vanished. Others believed a massive rogue wave swept them away. But that didn't explain the intact table, the stopped clocks, or the strange log entries describing a storm that never existed. What truly happened on Flannan Isle remains one of the oldest maritime mysteries of the North Atlantic. 3 men disappeared without a struggle, without a storm, and without leaving a single trace behind. To this day, the lighthouse still stands, and sailors swear that on certain nights you can see faint lanterns moving inside. Though the place has been empty for more than a century, the mysteries continues. The mystery of the locked library case of Bristol. In 1996, the Central Library of Bristol gained national attention, not for its books, but for what happened inside its old Victorian reading room. Staff had always complained about drafts, flickering lights, and strange knocking inside the walls. But nobody took it seriously until the disappearance of Alice Maynard, a graduate student writing a thesis on rare manuscripts. Alice was last seen entering the rare collections room, a chamber secured by a solid metal door requiring 2 keys, one held by staff and one signed out to the researcher. Cameras recorded her walking inside at 4:12 p.m. She carried a notebook, a pencil, and a small tape recorder. At 6:00 p.m., a librarian knocked on the door to remind her the library would close soon. No answer. They unlocked the door. The room was empty. Alice's backpack sat on the table. Her pencil was snapped in half. The tape recorder had captured only static, except for a faint sequence of knocks, evenly spaced, echoing like they came from inside stone walls. The windows were sealed. The ventilation ducts were too small for a person. And the only door had been locked the entire time with no tampering. Police inspected the tapes. The knocks formed a pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, repeated several times. A code often associated with distress calls. A maintenance crew later reported that parts of the building sat above abandoned tunnels sealed off years earlier. Old maps showed staircases that led to sub-basements no longer in use. Yet none of those passages connected to the rare collections room. 2 weeks later, a cleaner found Alice's notebook inside the library's attic, a space accessible only with a key senior staff didn't even use anymore. Dust covered every surface except for one clean circle where the notebook lay. The final page contained a sentence written in a shaky hand. "Someone is knocking. They want me to follow." No other trace of Alice was ever found. The library still opens daily, but workers refuse to stay past closing time. They say the knocks continue, always 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, echoing from somewhere inside the walls. The last mystery. The mystery of the fog walker of Route 17. On a remote stretch of Route 17 in upstate New York, drivers have reported the same unbelievable sight for more than 40 years. A silent figure walking through dense fog, only to vanish the moment headlights touch him. But one incident in 2003 remains the most documented. Just after midnight on October 3rd, truck driver Harold Levin was hauling medical supplies along the highway. A heavy fog rolled in, thick, white, almost metallic. Visibility dropped to nearly 0. As Harold slowed his truck, he saw a figure standing on the road shoulder. Tall, thin, wearing old-fashioned clothing, suspenders, a pale shirt, and boots. The man didn't react to the truck. He just stared into the fog. Harold pulled over to ask if he needed help. But the moment he opened the door, the figure vanished. No footprints, no movement in the grass, nothing. Disturbed, Harold radioed it in. Police searched but found nothing. They told him other drivers had seen similar apparitions for years. But the next day made everything stranger. Harold reviewed footage from his dash camera. At first it showed only fog, but as the truck slowed, a shadowy human outline appeared, clear, upright, unmistakable. Then the camera glitched, static filled the screen, and a distorted face seemed to flash for less than a second. Investigators analyzed the footage and declared it inconclusive. A week later, Harold returned home to find a muddy footprint on his front porch, a boot print matching the size and pattern of old 1940s work boots. He lived 90 miles away from Route 17. Local historians later revealed that a railway worker named Samuel Briggs died near that stretch in 1943 after being struck by a supply train during heavy fog. His co-workers reported one odd detail. Samuel had been seen walking back and forth through the mist minutes before the accident, as if searching for something. Today, Route 17 often carries fog over its quiet hills, and every so often a driver reports a pale figure drifting through the haze. Some say he's trying to finish a walk he never completed. Others say he's warning travelers to slow down. But everyone agrees on one thing: no matter how close you get, the fog walker is always just out of reach. If you like this video, like and subscribe for more mysterious stories.